Serious, what is the most heartbreaking thing a child has said to you? My nephew told me he thought I was his dad. His dad is in prison for being a moron. Tried to flip guns while on parole for drug and violent assault charges. I spent, maybe, a day a month near my sister at this point in time, and I was the only good male influence in their lives. You're his Yongdu. Maybe this isn't one thing, but a small conversation. I was on a bus to NYC, and next to me was a mom and her son, who was maybe 5 years old. She was a complete butthole to him. She kept saying things like, "I can't wait to give you back to your dad," and stop talking to me and being so annoying. It was a 5-hour bus ride and she had brought no toys, no books, nothing for him to entertain himself. He started talking to me, and because I felt awful for him, I spent the trip letting him play on my phone and asking him about his friends. Towards the end of the ride, he asks if I like superheroes. I told him yes, and I asked him, if you were a superhero, what would your powers be? I forget what he said exactly, but his mom turns to him and goes, "Stop being so stupid. You're never going to have superpowers." He turned to me and just in the saddest little defeated voice goes, "I know, but I really wish I could." It broke my heart. I wanted to adopt him and be his mom forever. This is so sad. Hopefully his dad is a better parent. We were looking after a friend's daughter. She was 7. My friend has been a single mom the whole time. My friend's daughter was playing with my daughter and husband and they were all laughing and having a good time. Then the girl hugged my daughter and said, "When I meet my daddy, I hope he's just like your daddy." Dang near wrecked me. Oh no, this one almost physically hurts. When I die, you can keep my Uno cards. It should only be a week or 2, then you can have them. You've never experienced real problems until you play trucks with a random 6-year-old breathing through a vacuum attached to a zipper in his chest. I found a note my 8-year-old daughter wrote to a friend about how much she misses her and cries, etc. They were both cancer patients and the friend passed away over 3 years ago. Oh god, that's so heartbreaking. Kids are hanging out with me in the burn unit because CPS took the whole lot of them after one received another, large, serious burn. Older sibling matter-of-factly tells me, "You have to be good. That's why mommy sprayed her with boiling water." FML almost took a baby home that night. Frick me, that's horrific. To me, burns are one of the absolute worst injuries imaginable. Mom and dad fight a lot, and when he goes to work she just leaves us here alone. "I want to live with you, I promise I'll work hard. Please let me live with you." My 8-year-old niece. Dad worked offshore for 2 weeks. Mom went on benders. 2 drug addicts with 3 amazing kids they didn't deserve. She was sobbing and helping load firewood to prove she was useful so she could live with us. We were living with family and had no way to get custody. My heart shattered into a million pieces. Her grandmother has custody now. They turned into amazing teenagers. But I'll never forget that tear and mud-stained face begging us to take her away that day. This actually just happened yesterday. I was picking up my 5-year-old son at kindergarten when he asks if his friend Elliot can come trick-or-treating with us. Because Elliot's dad is dead so he can't go trick-or-treating and he is sad. Died earlier this year. Took me a full millisecond to say yes. I hope you get to take the little dude trick-or-treating. I worked at a summer camp and once had a 9-year-old girl in my group who we were warned had witnessed acts of extreme domestic violence. One day I noticed her sitting alone at lunch, so my friend and I went and sat with her. She was clearly anxious, so I asked her what was up. She said something to the effect of, "Last night I dreamed grandpa was hurting grandma again, but this time I stopped him. I took a stick and I hit him until he didn't get up anymore. It's okay though. It was a dream. Now grandma is in heaven and grandpa is in HELL." I later found out she had been in the next room while her grandfather beat her grandmother to death. One day my daughter was supposed to hang out with my husband's mother. It started raining and not long after we get a call from grandmother saying since it was raining, she needed to cancel as their plans were to hang outside. My daughter was bummed out so we decided to go out to my mom's house instead. To get to my mom's house you had to drive by the other grandmother's house. We drive by and husband's mom is outside playing in the raining with all of the other grandkids. My daughter who sees and asks me why doesn't grandmother like me, she was 6. That's the day I told my husband I was done taking the kids to visit. My daughter saw then how big a piece of crap my Mill is. She's now 17 and can now really see how bad she plays favorites. Now Mill will make comments about how my kids are too old for her and have nothing to do with her. Oh well. I just throw that story back in her face relentlessly every time she tries bitching about how your kids want nothing to do with her. We were watching our 3-year-old nephew until his father came to pick him up. His dad had bailed the last few times he was supposed to have the kids and didn't tell anyone he wasn't coming. He just never showed up. The kid kept asking to go home with us instead and we said he couldn't because he was going to spend the weekend with his dad. His face fell and he said really softly, "I know he's not coming," and went to his room. It was heartbreaking. His dad never showed. Wasn't said directly to me. Boo. When I worked in a community home for teenagers who could live at their own homes for whatever reason. One kid, usually all hyper and a bit of a troublemaker, was on the phone with his mother and he said, "Please just get your crap together so I can come home." Not an ounce of anger in his voice, just pleading. Ugh. I've seen things like this because of my job. Homebound tutor in a very low income district. The stories that these students tell me just destroy me, and the whole area is like this. Just kills me at times. Used to nanny 2 younger boys. This past spring their parents filed for divorce. One of the most heartbreaking things was when I was tucking in the 8-year-old and he said, "They keep saying it's not my fault, but I think mommy and daddy are fighting because of me." I have many burn scars from work. I'm a chef. I like to volunteer at my kid's school. One day I was working with a child on his reading. He saw my arms and said, "I'm sorry people hurt you too." Without thinking I explained that they are just scars from work, mostly self-inflicted but not on purpose. He then lifted his shirt to show me a large amount of scars and wounds covering his torso and said, "Oh, because my family makes these." I gave him a little squeeze and told him I was proud of him. I then calmly excused myself so that I could go speak with administration, telling him I needed to use the restroom. The school brought in a ton of people. I was interviewed over and over again. My daughter told me a week or so later that her friend was no longer attending school. My heart breaks for him, but I hope no one is hurting him anymore. Thank you. I've told this story before on Reddit, but here it is again. My daughter was at daycare last year. I finish work at 5:30, so there's only her and another kid there when I pick her up. Usually, I parked up and came in and stood by the door. She was looking out of the window. I overheard this. "When is your dad coming for you?" "I don't know. He forgets me. Sometimes. He always forgets me." Which I was pretty sad about since I've never left her anywhere. "You're my favorite out of all my sister's boyfriends. That's how I found out I was being cheated on. Comedy, thanks kiddo. I feel terrible for you, but this one was a little funny. At least you were the favorite." Used to volunteer at a children's hospital, in the emergency department. One of my duties was to bring toys to the kids, keep them entertained and happy, etc. This one kid comes in after being in a car accident that killed his dad and brother, and his mom was in a coma in another hospital. I pull out the iPad with movies and ask what he wants to watch. Cause 2. I sat with him and held it together. He talked to me a little about his dad, and how they like to watch races together. He had no idea what had happened. Finally, the nurses came in to take him to surgery. I was a college kid, and in no way prepared to deal with a tragedy like that. They sent me home early, and I had a stiff drink and just cried. When I was in high school, my youth group went to the children's hospital to spend time with the kids. There was one little girl who had cancer and it wasn't likely that she was going to last much longer. When my youth pastor was talking to her, she climbed into his lap and started crying because she hadn't seen her parents in a long time. The nurse told us that her parents haven't been by the hospital since the day they dropped her off, which was months before our visit. Eventually we had to leave and my youth pastor hadn't left her side this whole time. When he said we have to leave, she started crying and begging him not to leave her alone. He promised her that he would come back to visit as soon as possible. He went back 2 days later and the girl had passed away. Freaking heck. Saddest one in this whole thread. I work in special ed, so sad stories are inevitable. One time during breakfast, one 6th grader I have came up to me and randomly said, "Ms. Stompin' me porch toad. You know I'm like this because when I was a baby in my mommy's tummy, something wrapped around my throat and choked me. My brother says that's why I'm stupid. My sister is the only normal one even though when I was little, I didn't mean to, but I dropped her when she was baby. It was an accident, I promise. It was so out of nowhere and heartbreaking that all I could say was that it wasn't his fault and he isn't stupid. He's actually close to being on grade level. 2. No matter how much harder work we give him and tell him he's doing a good job, he's always going to think in the back of his head that he's stupid, just cause his brother said something mean. Okay, this was the post that got me. For what it's worth, and speaking from my ex-GF who was a teacher, she loved to tell kids who had a rough upbringing the Mewtwo quote from the Pokemon movie. I see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. She said the kids were mostly uplifted by this. My 9-year-old nephew told me he wishes his dad, my brother, didn't drink so much. He's mentioned that before, but what really broke my heart is when he said once that when he has kids of his own, he doesn't even know if he will want them to meet his dad because he drinks so much. Number 9-year-old should have to think about crap like that. I overhear my son, adopted from an orphanage at age 6, tell our daughter, also adopted, that mommy doesn't like babies. I like babies, honey, I responded. Why do you think I don't like babies? His eyes fill up with tears. Then why did you leave me in the orphanage for so long? Apparently one of the workers at the orphanage had told him I was his birth mom and he was trying to make sense of my long absence from his life. I volunteered with kids in foster care. The organization I was with has a huge building where the social workers are and it's also where supervised visits take place. When a kid has to come in, they would wait in this play area where I worked. So this little boy and his younger sister come in. They were probably 6 and 4, maybe younger. The little girl is so excited and tells me she is going to see her mommy that day. The boy, however, looks sad, doesn't really talk to anyone and wants to just watch a movie. Long story short, mom didn't show up and both kids just kind of waited around for hours. The boy had obviously lost hope that she would come and the little girl's excited face and huge smile slowly turned into sad disappointment. Both of these things break my heart. The org I work for makes the parents show up 45 minutes before the kids for this exact reason. That way they don't even have to put their little coats on if mommy isn't going to show. A very talented girl who came for a piano lesson just sat there in tears, unable to play or focus on the music. When I asked her what was wrong, she said that her father had developed a bad drug habit and had sold their piano to buy drugs. He also told her there was no more money to pay for music lessons. At that point, I arranged practice time for her on a school piano and volunteered to teach her for free for the while because music study offered a positive focus in her life. I was with my family friends once and the mum and her 4-5-year-old son were sitting there and he was looking at magazines and brochures. He must have thought you could literally buy people because he pointed to a woman modeling clothes in the magazine and said, "Mom, I'm tired of you, I wanna buy a new mum." Poor woman is very sensitive and burst into tears. Oh man, she's going to have it rough if when the I hate yous come out in the teens. Mum said you wanted to abort us, so why do you freaking care? My twins in 2 separate arguments about various reasons, namely, behavioral issues and why it wasn't acceptable for them to act certain ways. Their mother and I divorced on bad terms almost 13 years ago, and she told them about an argument she and I had before they were born. I never said I wanted to abort them. It was her yelling at me during one of our fights and saying she should just abort them since I didn't want them anyway, which isn't what I said. The first time I heard it was 3 years ago when my daughter twin was screaming at me about why I wouldn't let her go to Florida without a chaperone to spend time with her online boyfriend. It was also the first time I had direct evidence that my ex-wife had worked for years to turn the kids against me. Whoa, I'm so sorry. My mom tried turning me against my dad when they get divorced. Just keep loving the heck out of your kids, they'll see how wrong she is about anything else she's said about you. I'm going to go slightly out of bounds on this one. It was a guy with Down syndrome who could barely speak, but could sign a bit. He was cared for by his only living relative, his sister, who was not in good health. Neighbor called us as he was wandering around in the street. His sister hadn't been seen all day and he was locked out. Forced the door. She's dead inside. He just wanders like normal and signs to me, wake her up. My heart broke into pieces. I didn't know enough marketing or BSL to explain. My son had a nasty flu when he was 5. The worst night of it came when his temp spiked and he began to throw up and was screaming in pain. As my wife is holding him, he reaches for me and cries out, "Don't let me die, Daddy. Please don't let me die." I was devastated. I don't think I've ever felt as helpless in my life. I was able to keep it together until his temp was stabilized at the hospital, but then it was sob city. I can't remember the last time I cried like that. My wife and I are in the middle of a divorce and we both have had to move out of our apartment during the process. Our daughter, who is 4/1/2, has said on multiple occasions, "Dad, I want to move back to our old home because I was happier there." As a father, that's one of the most heartbreaking things to hear come from any child, let alone your own, because I feel so helpless and know right now I can't do much to change that. This is actually something I said to my mom, but she has told me later how much it broke her heart at the time. When I was 7, my parents decided we should move to Africa for a year, and so we did. After first landing in Kampala, Uganda, we had to drive a long way in a crappy van with no belts, on some pretty crumbly roads. Whilst on the road, I turned to my already pretty worried mother and said, "If I die here, can you bury me back home in Norway?" My aunt and uncle used to be foster parents. They got one little girl a few years ago that came to live with them in September or November. She was severely underweight at 12 years old, and her growth had been stunted due to malnourishment. She was maybe 4 feet tall if she stood on a dictionary, weighed about 50 pounds, and couldn't walk very well because her legs were deformed because of the malnourishment. She was taken away from her father because he didn't feed her. When my aunt asked her what she wanted for Christmas, the little girl asked for a bag of groceries. People who foster kids have a special place in heaven. My son struggles with anxiety and general social interactions. Last year, 2nd grade, over dinner we were discussing what he did that day at recess. This is the convo. Me: "How was recess today, buddy? Did you play with anyone?" Him: "Kind of. I thought I had some friends but they ran away from me." Me, as my heart slowly cracks: "Oh, does that happen often?" Him: "Yes. I usually play alone in the corner. But don't worry, Mom. I'm okay with it." Me, tearing up: "You're okay with it? Do you prefer playing alone?" Him: "Not really. I wish I had friends. But when I'm alone, no one hurts my feelings and everyone seems happier. So that's okay. Thankfully this year is 100x better, but to have my sweet, empathetic, loving little boy know that no one wants to play with him and still see their happiness is just ugh. Being empathetic and a child teenager even can make things so incredibly difficult. They see things and understand things, often much sooner than their peers do, and that itself can be isolating. But as long as the world doesn't dampen his spirits, I'm sure your boy will grow into an amazing person, and either way will make tons of friends who really care about him. I deliver pizza. Had a little girl no older than 5 sprint up to the door, smiling, and then her face immediately dropping upon seeing me as she proceeded to mutter, "Oh, I thought you were my daddy coming home from jail." Those words exactly like that. The hardest part was resisting the urge to grab this lady's kid and just hug the absolute crap out of her. I was in a psych ward when I was 16. The unit was for children and adolescents. A 12-year-old boy casually commented on how he lost his virginity to his sister, 9. He went on to mention their mother's reaction was boys will be boys. At the time, I was crazy, and it struck me as WTF. 15 years later, it just breaks my heart. All the staff went into serious face mode and I never saw the kid again. Hopefully, his sister didn't either. My mummy ate my banana. My mummy's horrible. This from a clearly neglected kid with 4 brothers and sisters, who constantly had headless, which she referred to as "I've got bugs." Often slept in her school clothes and did not know how to wipe herself after using the bathroom. She would be about 12 now. I often think about her and her siblings and hope they're okay. One of the kids on prac was acting out, trying to run out the school gate, purposefully hitting his head on the fence to try and go to the office. Being a student teacher with no clue, I squatted down next to him and casually asked about his day, what was going on. He said he had a terrible day because no one in his class liked to play with him. I asked him about his interests. He shut it down saying no one else likes the things he likes. I asked him how he felt and he said that he was lonely, that he had no friends. I asked him if I could be his friend, but he said friends shouldn't be that old. I could see that even his teacher dismissed him because he was disruptive. She also had 32 other personalities to teach. Anybody that would try to physically harm themselves to get away from others was a major red flag. Saw that he liked toy trucks, so brought some with me each day afterward and we'd play with them together during lunch times. He'd always come up and tell me today was the day he was gonna win the race, and his smile when he did was worth $1 million. Insight and caring can make a massive difference for kids, and it sounds like you've got them in spades. I'm glad you took the time to help that boy. As a paramedic, I once transported an elderly grandmother from a last chance motel room with her 2 young grandchildren to the ER for chest pain. Children that young are not supposed to go to the ER, but they had no one else. I took them to the cafeteria while my partner restocked the ambulance. It was mid-morning and they were hungry. I don't know what they had for breakfast, if anything. I asked them what they would like to have, and the way the youngest asked me, "You mean we can have anything?" made me so sad. I still cry when I think about it. There was nothing else I could do for them beyond transport grandma and buy them breakfast. I know when I was a kid my parents were really strict about what I could have for breakfast. No sugary cereals or pastries. I can see younger me reacting like this in a similar situation. Or they may have had an idea of things costing money and were shocked you, someone they didn't really know, were letting them get whatever food they wanted. I was an only child until I was 16 when my mom had a son with my stepdad. When my little brother was around 2, I had the busy life of a teenager and didn't really have time to do the things he wanted to do when I would come home to visit. His big thing was having brother push him on the swing set. Every time I'd walk through the door it'd be Makootingtat. Translation: Michael, let's go to the swing set. It was hard to say no to this cute little boy with his whitish blonde hair and his big brown eyes, and this one time in particular I had some friends to meet up with but told him, okay, but just for a few minutes. He dragged me by my hand to the swing where I promptly put him on it and started pushing. He squealed with delight until I had a brain fart, and instead of pushing the kid I pushed the swing, which immediately slid down his legs and made him land directly on his head in the dusty dirt below the well-used swing. I picked him up just as he was able to catch his breath and let out a cry, his tears immediately rolling through the dirt on his chubby toddler cheeks. We make eye contact and he stops crying long enough to say, "I sawi Miku." I will never forget that he loved me so much that at 2 years old he was apologizing to me for a mistake I made. I love that kid. It feels like yesterday, but we're just a few days away from his 21st birthday. When I was leaving home to come live in Italy, my little 4-year-old cousin spent a lot of time with me. When I kissed her goodbye she was crying and begging me to please not leave her behind. She did this every time I visited home. Broke my heart. She's 15 now and doesn't care whether we visit or not, lol. I was walking down one of the main roads in Dublin city centre. Right around the corner, there's a pop-up soup kitchen of sorts. So there is a few homeless people around the adjacent streets. I see a young girl, maybe around 6 years old, and her mother, walking, both shabby homeless looking. The young girl walks by a bin that was overfilling, with extra cardboard boxes around it. She picks up a cardboard box and excitedly says, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, this can be my pillow tonight." The sweet innocence of that dang near killed me. Poor child. My daddy hits mommy, then mommy hits me, so I hit. Classmates' names. Same kid. I am your husband and women respects their husbands. Yeah, not a conducive environment. I was on a flight next to this kid who was about 6 or 7. We got to talking and he was really excited to show me his iPad and the games he enjoyed playing. Then he showed me his UGR cards. I kept talking to him because it seemed rude to take my book out. Plus he was so excited to show me his games. At the end of the flight he sincerely thanked me for talking to him, as most of the people he sat next to on flights actively ignored him and weren't nice to him. I felt pretty bad for him as I got off the plane. You're a good person. One of my good friends just lost her boyfriend of 15 years. They had 2 kids together, a boy and a girl. The dad died one day, down to the minute before the little girl's 4th birthday. The saddest thing I've ever heard was when I went to their house a few nights after to pay my respects and her daughter came up to me and just stated my dad is dead. She doesn't understand that he's actually gone and not coming back. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.